Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's N4 webinar on workplace inclusion, a roadmap for senior managers. Now, before we like to begin our webinars today, we would like to begin with an acknowledgement that N4 is hosted at CHIO, which is located in Ottawa, Ontario. Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia, and we honor them and this land. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We also honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land as well. My name is Andrew Tomeyer. I'm the Education Coordinator with N4. My pronouns are he, him. I'll be hosting and moderating today's presentation. My co-host is Colleen Drake, who will be monitoring the Q&A box today and assisting with any background technical items. I'm pleased to introduce you to today's speaker, Michaël Séguin. Michaël is an assistant professor at St. Paul University's Providence School of Transformative Leadership and Spirituality. He currently leads an SSHRC-funded research project in partnership with N4 on inclusion in Ontario-based settlement agencies. Welcome, Michaël, again. Thank you for coming back, and thank you for joining us today. Feel free to turn on your camera. Today's session is being recorded and will be uploaded to our N4 platform, and we'll share this with you when it becomes available. And should there be any technical issues during this webinar, we will inform you with details for an alternate session. And before we begin today's event, we'd like to take a moment to introduce you to our platform features to help enhance your participation experience. Throughout today's session, we invite you to write your questions in our Q&A window. We know that sometimes many of you might have the same question or be interested in a particular response. So you do have the option to upvote a question. And please upvote questions you're interested in also hearing the answer to, and we will prioritize which questions we pose to Michaël first. With that said, our speaker today has no conflicts of interest to declare. And so let's jump right into today's presentation. Welcome back, Michaël. Please take it away.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. So I'll start sharing my screen. Up. Yes. Perfect. So welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today to talk about workplace inclusion, more from the perspective of what senior managers or managers can do. And just to introduce a little bit more myself, so I use the pronouns he, him. If you have questions in French, you can also raise them. I'm sorry, I cannot translate in other languages than those two. I'm a professor at the Providence School of Transformative Leadership and Spirituality at St. Paul University, based in Ottawa. I'm a sociologist by training, especially of sociologist of race and ethnic relations. My field of research is EDI, especially in the third sector, so in community-based organizations, universities, that type of organizations. Just to situate a little bit more who I am, I'm the son of dairy farmers from Quebec. My wife is Moroccan, so I'm used to cross-cultural dialogue and, well, from time to time, conflict too. I'm a father of a wonderful son, a professional bargainer already at the age of 4, and I'm very proud to be with you and to be proud of this great network that is N4. And so today, what we'll be covering is a quick definition of what is equity, diversity, and inclusion. We hear a lot of those buzzwords, so I'd like to define them a little more, at least the way I understand what they mean. And I'd like to explore a tool that you can use if you're thinking about making an EDI turn or deepening your EDI practices within your organization. So we'll be looking at the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion benchmarks. So there are different tools on the market. This one is free. And I'd like to explore a little bit more what it can offer or how it can help us to think about what to do when it comes to EDI. And because I'm also a researcher, I'll end in roughly 35 minutes on a more kind of research note, looking at, a few research-based strategies that really make a difference for underrepresented groups. So what we know based on data that you can do and that can make a real difference in your organizations, because there's a lot of EDI practices and some are a bit more effective than others. So we'll look at that. And so here's the menu for today. A good 5 minutes on what is EDI, and then we'll look at how do we do that? What are the main questions we need to ask when we want to implement an EDI program? And then we'll end on a practical note. What does really make a difference? A few tips, a few winning strategies, and a Q&A. So before we get there and we can start, I have a few questions to get you, to get to know my audience a little more. So what we'll do is an interactive question. I'll use an interactive question software, and you simply have either to scan the QR code or you go on wooklab.com and you enter the code EDI manage, or Colleen will give you a URL in the chat. You can also click this link and you'll get online to this interactive platform where I will survey you with 5 or 6 brief questions. So we'll start with the first one. Oh, wow, you're so great with technology, folks. That's nice. Already 60 people connected. I like that. So what is your position? Just to know a little bit more who I'm talking to. So I see a lot of middle managers, a few executive, a few supervisor, a few employee. Well, my talk is about what managers can do, but at the end of the day, it's good for everyone, because you'll see a bit more when we think about an EDI action plan. What do we include into that? What are the questions? And if you see that your executive is a bit, the CEO doesn't know, she doesn't know, he doesn't know what to do with that, you might have a few cues that you can share with that person. So that's great. Welcome to everyone. Here is my my next questions for you. What is the size of your organization? So a lot of, well, it's a good distribution between small, medium, and big. One of the shortcomings of EDI is that it was mostly built for big organizations. So you see what you can apply within your setting. There's many ways to adapt EDI to smaller organizations, but you'll see that part of the toolkit might be a little bit more, some parts might be a little bit more difficult to implement. But I'll give you the overall picture and you pick and choose what worked best in your setting. Oh, sorry, I'll go back to a third question. What is your main sector of activity? Perfect. So a lot of people in the healthcare systems, in the settlement sector, a few in the public service, and a few in other settings. So you'll see also the EDI is coming from the business sector. So some of the practices may apply, other may not. So again, take what's good for your sector. And my fourth question is, we'll do a word cloud, and I'd like to know a little more. What does it mean for you, those 3 letters, EDI? So far, equity is scoring very high, fairness, oh, it's moving to it quickly. Yeah, everyone, inclusion, respect, inclusiveness, diversity, equity, diversity, and inclusion, that's good. And so, yeah, that's really what we'll be exploring today. How do we connect those three main ideas of diversity, inclusion, and equity that brings about fairness, anti-oppression, inclusion, respect, when we really take them seriously and get some tools to get there. My next questions, and I have two more after that. What is your level of experience and knowledge with EDI? Wonderful. So most people have a kind of a medium level of knowledge. Some are already expert in the field, other as a high, and whatever you're coming from, the goal is just to open up this conversation and see what's possible to do. So there is no prerequisite. It's not a university class anyway. And my next question is, which of the following equity-seeking groups, if any, do you belong to? Wonderful. So, I mean, I'm sorry, my questions are not really intersectional. We can crisscross them, of course, but we have a lot of women, many racialized people, some indigenous people, some member of the LGBTQ plus community, some people with disabilities, and others. I mean, and I'm asking this question to know a bit to whom I'm talking to, but also to acknowledge that coming from an equity-seeking group or for an underrepresented group, you start with some advantage in that discussion about EDI because you already know to some extent what we're talking about. You can use your own experience as someone who has lived discriminations or microaggressions to understand the experience of other, and that is something really precious in the kind of conversation we are having today. And finally, that's my last question. What do you hope to gain from this webinar? So many people want knowledge, education, tools, perspective, a new understanding of how we can do that, what's happening, new ideas, I guess, and that's what we'll do, especially through the benchmarks. It will give you some tools to look at this. Wonderful. So let's start with a brief overview of what is EDI. So EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion, is coming from the broader field of diversity management. It's a let's say that's the way diversity management evolved over the years. And when my diversity management emerged in the US at the end of the 1980s, start of the 1990s. The focus was a lot on diversity, and the idea of equity and inclusion came later on down the road to expand the perspective of diversity management that was a bit too limited. But just to know a bit what we're talking about, at that point, one of the key scholars in that field, Cox Jr., defined managing diversity as planning and implementing organizational systems and practices to manage people so that the potential advantages are maximized while its potential disadvantages are minimized. So we're really talking about opening space for diversity. It can be for business purposes, it can be for social justice purposes, but we want to open space for different people from different backgrounds with various identities. And he adds to that, further, I view the goal of managing diversity as maximizing the ability of all employees to contribute to organizational goals and to achieve their full potential unhindered by group identities, such as gender, race, nationality, age, and department affiliation. So we're already getting a glimpse of what we want. We want people to contribute to their full potential unhindered by any identities. And that helps us already to move into what is diversity. And for each of those big words, big concepts, diversity, inclusion, and equity, I propose you to ask a key question. And when it comes to diversity, for me, the key questions is who is there, who is missing? And thinking about how can we define diversity, my definition is attributes that the group uses to pose some people as normal and others as different. So there's nothing neutral about diversity. Diversity is about power relationships. Who do we define in a society, in a workplace, as mainstream, and who do we define as diverse or as different? And there's many attributes we can classify if we want those different attributes of diversity. Some, according to Garden, Watts, and Rowe, are internal. So the internal dimension is a dimension that we have no control over. No control over my gender, my age as a white man, young, more or less young, my sexual orientation, my physical or mental abilities, my ethnicity, or my race. Then there's the second ring, which is about the external dimension of diversity that we have partial but quite limited control. So let's say your geographical location, your level of income, your personal habits, recreational habits, your religion, it may change over time, like your education background, but it's not that easy to change that. Your work experience, your parental status, marital status, those are elements of diversity that can play in an organization. And the last layer is those organizational attributes. What is your function? Are you a manager or not? Are you unionized or not? What is your level of seniority? What is the location of where you work? That kind of stuff. So to know which element of diversity to consider is really dependent on where you are and what is your milieu. If you're working in an already feminine milieu, I guess that gender might not be an issue. But in other cases, gender, race can be very important issue. And the same goes for the status within the organizations. Who are getting the full-time jobs? Who are getting the contract jobs? And those are really issues of diversity that are very important and that are tying in the issues of equity that we will explore in a moment. So the key questions when it comes to diversity are really who is represented, who's not, and who gets the management positions. Your frontline workers may be of all colors, but your management may be all white. So those are tricky and important questions that we ask when we start thinking about diversity. The key questions for inclusion are who does not fit in, for whom is it easy to fit in, and for who is it difficult to fit in? And the issue of inclusion can be defined as an issue of individual empowerment, fulfilling two basic needs, the need to belong and the need to be unique. As human beings, we all have those needs. To feel that we're part of a community, we're part of something bigger, but also to feel that we're recognized of what is distinct from others, what is unique about us. And in organizational setting, we can get both assimilation, exclusion, differentiation, and inclusion. And it's easy to confuse assimilation with inclusion, or to confuse differentiation, which is in fact more about tokenism, with inclusion. Because to be really included, you need to have this space to bring your whole self to work, to be yourself. But at the same time, you need to feel also that you're part of the whole, that you're an insider, you get access to information, you know what's happening, and you know that people will value what you will bring as ideas. So being in the differentiation tokenist position is no better than being in the assimilationist position where you need to hide your identity to fit within the whole. What we're talking about is really being unique, but belonging at the same time. So the key questions here are who feels like an insider, who can be fully oneself, within the workplace. When we move toward those questions, we're asking questions relating to inclusion. And the last concept, equity, is about who is harmed by the status quo or who is favored by the status quo. And most organizations work on a status quo, on organizational routines that seems pretty neutral at first sight. But the more we dig and the more we realize that this way of working, this order of the game, is in favor of some and detrimental to others. So what is equity? Well, equity is about identifying and removing systemic barriers that maintain inequities across groups. Looking at ways of working, and we'll do that in just a moment, that could make a difference for everyone and not just for, let's say, white folks who know how to navigate their workplace. And so when we think about equity, we ask questions such as, who do existing processes favor? What are the built-in biases in our way of operating? And to do that, to raise those questions about diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's various rationales. Some will simply do that because they want to comply with the law. To be honest, it's not really convincing. That's not a very good way to get people on board. Others will do that because they want to develop their organizations. They want to reach out to more employees with more talents, reach out to new markets, so get more diversified staff to serve the needs of customers. That's good. That's a way to do it. That's a way to get on board. Some people might be more cynical about that, but at least if I have as a starting point, it can be a way to start with. Others will do that because they want to honor the dignity of various people. So to be more aligned with their own values. And I feel that more and more, that's the way EDI, the field of EDI is driven to be in currents with our values. That the same goes for social justice. We want to achieve fairness and equity. And a lot of people get into this so-called EDI business after Black Lives Matter because they felt the call to honor the dignity of others, especially of Black people, and because they felt compelled to do their part in building a more just social order. But another way to do it, or I mean, you can combine the different rationales as you wish, is also to build competence, to offer a way for your staff to move on and to be able to deal with people in different situations. And that implies building competence, building a cross-cultural competence, understanding the realities of different people to be able to better adapt to them. So those are different rationales that you can use to build your EDI programming or the way you think about EDI. So EDI programming, what does it mean? Diversity work, how do we get there? So as I said, I want to explore maybe in the next 10 minutes, those global diversity, equity, and inclusion benchmarks. So what I'm talking about here is that's a guide of about 100 pages, pretty straightforward, that was launched roughly 20 years ago by three consultants, Molefi, O'Mara, and Richter, in consultation with about 80 scholars. And what they wanted to do is to build a toolkit, to build a frame of reference that any business, nonprofit or profit, doesn't matter, who wants to start in EDI, a toolkit that they can use, a framework that they can use to better assess where they're at. And what we find in that toolkit are a set of 275 benchmarks in 5 levels. So you have 15 big categories. You can look at different practices, roughly 20 to 30 practices in each category that would help you to know on, let's say, for example, the EDI leadership aspect. Where is my organizations? Are we considered inactive, reactive, proactive, progressive, or within the leaders of this field with best practices? And so that's a tool that you can use, and I'd like to walk you through this tool, exploring what are those main categories. And some of them are part of what they think as foundationals to launch an EDI program. Part of them are part of internal practices that will make a difference to attract and retain employees from diverse backgrounds. Some of them are there to bridge those different groups, to bridge the foundation, the internal practice with the external. And the external group is about your outreach. How do you get involved with a diversity of stakeholders in the way your workplace is, your organization is operating? So what I'll do is just walk you through quickly each of those 15 categories and ask a few questions to help you consider how does those categories relate to getting a workplace that is more diversified, more inclusive, and more equitable. And so the first of the four groups that they use, the first one is about this was what they call the foundation. So how is EDI driving the strategy? How is EDI connected to the mission? How is EDI something that is espoused by your board, by your management within your organizations, and what kind of infrastructure did you build? So to support this EDI term, let's say. So the first category is really about vision. EDI vision, strategy, and business impact. So what we mean by that is EDI something that you launch? Is there, you have someone who you hired a consultant at some point, but it's not whatsoever connected to your daily business? Or is it something that is part of your strategic planning? Is it something that you have an action plan about and that you want to build on, something that you communicate to others? So it's really important that if you're serious about EDI and you want to make a difference for your employees and for your customers, it's really important to make sure that EDI is part of your vision, of your organizational vision, of your strategy, and that you have some kind of at least a minimal action plan of how you will do it. And having an action plan and to put it on the web page or to put it in a drawer is not enough. You also need to make sure that your leadership is accountable for putting in place, turning this action plan into real deeds. And here, when we talk about leadership, yes, we're talking about middle managers, but we're especially talking about your board and your executives. So are they familiar with EDI? Do they know what it is? Are they serious about bringing that up in their discussions when they think about the main orientations of the business? Do they need coaching? Are they involved with some EDI coaching or some EDI learning themselves? Or do they make this coaching available to middle managers who might be dealing with cross-cultural conflicts or with different issues or discriminations, harassment based on various identities on the day-to-day? So the leadership needs to be committed and on board. And some organizations are a bit further ahead into that. They tie promotion to having some knowledge about EDI and some actionable knowledge about EDI. The third category in the foundation group is having an EDI structure. So what's come to mind more obviously is having someone who's in charge of EDI and who has the best scenario is having an executive position or at least a say in your executive meetings. What comes to mind too is having a professional working on EDI. If you are big organizations, it can mean having a whole department working on EDI, such as you have a marketing department. Well, having a diversity, equity, and inclusion department is a way to show that you're serious and to bring people whose work it is to think about how to make this turn in your organizations. Depending on your means, what you can also do is having a task force. So you bring people from different departments within your organizations and you bring them to think together. How can we make this diversity turns? How is our organizations excluding, discriminating against? What difference can we make? And you can make those people more accountable to each other and to the organization as a whole because they are part of this task force, which goal is to make the organization more inclusive. You can launch employee resource groups. So groups for racialized people, groups for women, groups for French speakers, group for whatever for people with disabilities. So groups where people can support each other, but then can also you report what they are living and how it's possible to make a difference in their life. So the third point, the third category is really about building an infrastructure. So not only committees, but committees that can have an impact on what you're doing to make your organizations more inclusive. The second group is what a lot of people do think more spontaneously when we think about EDI, and does also explain why EDI managers are often in HR departments. So we're thinking about the internal dimension of EDI, which can be summarized into attracting and retaining a diverse workforce. And so category 4 is about who are you attracting? Who are you recruiting? What is your pool? And how can you make your recruitment more inclusive? Do you visit university and colleges? Do you visit university and colleges where there is a higher proportion of racialized people, for example? Do you work with people who might help you to diversify your recruitment pool? And there's a few agencies doing that in the Ottawa region. Do you have interview panels that are diversified so that when someone who is coming from an underrepresented group can see a friendly face or a face that looks more familiar for him or for her while interviewing? Are people checking themselves as members are member of the interview panel, checking one another for bias and being open about discussing what they see in each candidate? So we start looking at recruitment a bit differently to enlarge the pool. And in some cases it can go as far as having some recruitment quotas, but most business, what they do is they try to bring more diversity and diversify their outreach in terms of recruitment pool. The second, the category 5 is about job development, job advancement, and job progression. So we're looking into how do we accompany people when they get on board? Do we have sponsorship programs, or do we have mentorship programs to make sure that people, especially people coming from underrepresented groups, are not left alone when they come in? And then we can think about training. Who is getting access to training? Is the procedure to get access to training clear and equitable for everyone, or is it something that is decided in an office between only your supervisor and the employee? And the same goes for career advancement, for progression and promotion. Are we making sure that our procedures for promotions are equitable, that everyone knows how it works, that everyone is getting access to those jobs that might help you to move ahead and get promoted? So that's the kind of questions we're asking when we think about the category 5. When it comes to category 6, we're looking at job designs, classification, and compensation. So job design is really can tie into what is the job description? Is the job description based on the person who occupied this job for 40 years and who might be a white dude? Or is it designed only to the essential element of the job so that a broader array of people from different backgrounds might apply for this job? And are similar jobs getting the same compensations, the same attention, the same salary? So we look into salary equity at the same time when we think about those job design, classification, and compensation. And the last element, and that's one that can make a huge difference in the life of many underrepresented groups, is work-life integration, flexibility, and benefits. So we're coming into the territory of daycare, for example. What kind of support do we offer to employee? And if we're not able to offer childcare for kids, maybe we can be in touch with a daycare where we can send our employees. When we think about flexible time, is it something that is simply negotiated between a supervisor and employee, often an employee that is really performing really well, or is it something that is available for everyone? And the same goes for benefits, which can make a big difference when we talk about insurances and that kind of stuff. That can make a big difference in the life of many families. So this element of flexibility is really important. And the more broadly we can offer it, the bigger a difference it can make in attracting diverse talents and keeping them on the job. The third group is about bridging. So it's about connecting the foundational element, the internal element, and the external, and I'll get to the external in a moment, in an integrated EDI strategy. And there are four components of those bridging elements. The first one might sound a bit boring, but gosh, it is very important. And that's the issue of data, that's the issue of measurement. If you want to be able to identify if there are inequities in your way of recruiting, or if there are inequities in your way of promoting, or if you want to know if your workplace is diversified, you need to keep track of who is there and what are the identities of the people there. Keep track of the number of women, of the number of people of color, of indigenous people, of people with disabilities, of LGBT+, etc. And those numbers are really important because that's the only way to assess if there's a gap, let's say, between the frontline workers and the managers. So data is very important, and that's also the way to track down if there are departments that may be more problematic and others who are not. And so this issue of data is quite important. So you can gather data usually through surveys. You can gather those data through exit interviews, paying attention who's leaving and why. There's many various ways to collect data, but it's important to collect those data to know what are the dynamics within your organizations. Are you as inclusive as you wished? Category 9 is about internal and external communications. And it's really about being intentional on the language that you use, and